Morning, everyone. I wanted to offer you a little bit of biblical counsel, wisdom, encouragement, whatever you want to call it, for the rest of the week. And this morning, I wanted to reflect upon Psalm 1. So let's take a look at Psalm 1 here quickly and look at a couple insights. Blessed is the man who walks not in the counsel of the wicked, nor stands in the way of sinners, nor sits in the seat of scoffers. But his delight is in the law of the Lord, and on his law he meditates day and night. He is like a tree planted by streams of water that yields its fruit in its season, and its leaf does not wither. In all that he does, he prospers. The wicked are not so, but are like chaff that the wind drives away. Therefore the wicked will not stand in the judgment, nor sinners in the congregation of the righteous. For the Lord knows the way of the righteous, but the way of the wicked will perish. Now, first of all, not all psalms are created equal. Psalm 1 is here in the very beginning because Psalm 1 sets the pace for our lives. It's a very important psalm. It's there because it wants to get us started on the right foot in living our lives as Christians. So the first thing we notice is how we are to perceive this world, how we are to go about thinking about life in general. And one thing that really sort of grabs my attention in this is exactly the way that the psalmist describes Christian thinking. There's a balance here. You notice that. In verse 1, he talks about all the things that we are not to be associated with, what we are not to be defined by as Christians. And then in verse 2, all the things that we should be associated with. And so it takes both forms. One of the things that I think really bothers me most about a lot of Christians I run into is that we seem to be defined by everything that we're opposed to. We're against drinking, we're against smoking, we're against dancing, we're against X, Y, and Z. That's not a healthy way to be known, to be defined as a Christian. As Christians, we need to know what we don't believe, but also be able to define positively what we believe. It takes both and. And I think it's important to note that at the outset, the psalmist says, these are the things that you should not be associated with. Blessed is the man who doesn't walk in the counsel of the wicked. Blessed is the man who doesn't stand in the way of scoffers, nor sits in the seat of scoffers. There are certain things as Christians that we cannot be associated with. And we need to keep that in mind. Things associated with sin. We cannot be associated with those types of things. And they're very practical lessons for us here. There are certain things that you must never be around, associated with. Sexual deviancy, pornography, various sexual sins come to mind. These are things that we need to be striving for purity in our lives and both rejecting with our mouths and with our livelihood. But then the second thing, the positive element here, his delight is in the law of the Lord, and on his law he meditates day and night. There's an all-encompassing aspect to God's law. God created the world. He built into our world a sense of right and wrong. God declares in the very beginning that which is good and that which is not good. And so the psalmist says we must be meditating upon that day and night. The other day I was trying to find a phone number. Yeah, some people still make phone calls with their smartphones. It had been a while actually especially since I had actually used my phone for what it was originally designed to be. But as I was switching back and forth between screens on the phone and then trying to dial in this number, I found myself doing what I think the Bible calls meditation. It was, 765, 765, 765, 765, 765. Then you finally get the keypad, 765. Switch back. 443, all right, 443, 443, but 621, whatever. 621, whatever. Kept repeating it back to myself, little by little, more and more. This is the sense that the psalmist is talking about here when he meditates upon God's word, upon God's law. We must continually be given to this practice. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures, leads me beside the still waters. He restores my soul. It's not just simply memorizing the scriptures, although that's an important part and I think a lost art in our world today, but it's also meditating upon it, constantly reciting God's word back to ourselves as a way of reminder of God's goodness to us, of his mercy in this life. All of these things must be constantly going through our minds, and the more they do, the more they impact the way we live, the way we act, the way we treat one another. And notice what he says then. The end result is, he is like a tree planted by streams of water that yield its fruit in its season, and its leaf does not wither. The wicked are not so, but are like chaff that the wind drives away. Said in a sermon last month that a guy I knew that was very near to death once defined failure as being really good at something that doesn't really matter. And that definition has really stuck with me, has really motivated me in my life as a minister, as a father, as a husband, as a friend. I don't want to get really good at something that really doesn't matter in this life. I think the reverse of that is to be fruitful, is to be bearing fruit in this life. And that's exactly what the psalmist is saying here. That if we take God's word seriously, if we apply his law to our everyday lives and let it govern us, we become fruitful. What does that mean specifically? Well, I think in part it means that we become people that others want to be around. That there's an understanding that comes where they will say, hey, yeah, let's hang out with those people. Let's be around them because they kind of understand me. They understand, they get it. That's in part what I think it is to be a Christian, is that we understand life because God created life. And he instructs us and tells us what life is all about. And the more closely we walk with him in his word, the more real we become. And the better equipped we are to understand the uncertainties of life. That there is chaos in this world, that there are times when things are very uncertain in life. But nevertheless, we hold to the promise that God will not abandon us. He has not abandoned us. He is for us. And he will bring good out of even the seemingly chaotic circumstances that we find ourselves in this world and in this life. To be trees planted by streams of living water, bearing appropriate fruit in appropriate seasons. That's what the psalmist is saying being a Christian is all about. And then just one last reminder here. It comes by way actually of what we would call eschatology. That is understanding of the end times and how life will end. The Bible has a lot to say about how this world will end as well. 2 points again. Those who forsake God's law, those who walk in the counsel of the wicked, who stand in the way and learn and pick up and teach others sinful ways of life. Their lives end in judgment. The wicked will not stand in judgment, or sinners in the congregation of the righteous. There's a division that will take place. Those who forsake God's word, who forsake God's Son, will be cast out. There's this sense of them being cast off into darkness, into hell itself. But verse 6, the Lord knows the way of the righteous, but the way of the wicked will perish. How is it that the Lord, the covenant God of Israel, knows the way of the righteous? How is it that he can say this? Because many years after Psalm 1 is written, Jesus Christ comes into this world. And we talked about that earlier, that moral law, that sense of right and wrong that God built into this universe, that he wrote down in his law, his moral law. Jesus comes and he walks in God's moral law perfectly, thus attaining perfect righteousness. So when the psalmist says God knows the way of the righteous, yeah, he knows it because he is the way of the righteous. Jesus fulfilled God's law perfectly, so that when you and I put our faith in Jesus Christ, his righteousness becomes our righteousness. And I'm claiming right now a righteousness that is not my own. It's the righteousness that Jesus Christ attained for me. And this is the only way to salvation. It's only through Jesus that we will avoid wickedness and eternal damnation. Do you know that in your own heart? Are you living for that righteousness this morning? Because as Christians, this is what Psalm 1 calls us to do. To forsake wickedness, to put off, actively take a role in our sanctification. Put off sin. Don't walk in the ways of scoffers or in the ways of sinners and sit in the seat of scoffers. So, as you're sitting at home today, watching YouTube videos of your minister here in Valparaiso, what can you be doing? Well, there's a lot of things actually. You can be reading God's word, but more than just that, applying it to your life. Seeking to put sin to death in all that you do. Walking in the righteous ways that Jesus walked in. And seeking to live your life and model your life after his. Learning to be kind. Finding ways of bringing a little bit of joy to others around you. And so that's what you are called to do today. Is to do just that. Forsake that which is evil. Embrace that which God defines as good and righteous. And putting your faith in his Son Jesus as the only way to salvation. Continue to trust in him and walk in his ways. He will not lead you astray. He loves you an awful lot, and so do we. Continue to trust in him, and he will lead you where you need to go. God bless you guys, and we'll talk to you again soon.